Welcome back to the First Team. I'm Joe DeLeon. With me is my co-host, NFL Draft analyst Ryan Roberts, and we're doing another scouting report episode. We're almost coming around and finishing these up before we share our rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft. Today, we're talking two talented cornerbacks, that being Will Johnson from Michigan, and we're going to be doing Benjamin Morrison or Ben Morrison, however you want to call him. The long name thing is always weird. I never know what name to call a kid, but Ben Morrison from Notre Dame is who we're going to be talking about. Ryan, let's start off with Will Johnson, who seems like a pretty easy pick to be the top corner in this class, and how high he's going to rank amongst some of these other names at every other position will be revealed at some point. But background on him, this kid is freaky. 6'2", 202, massive frame. You usually don't see corners that big with that kind of weight. Any other info you can give our listeners on Will Johnson?
Well, it's no shock to people that follow recruiting or are Michigan historians to know that Will Johnson was destined to end up as a Wolverine because his father, Dion, was also a cornerback for the University of Michigan in the 1990s. So he was a Michigan legacy, and he ended up obviously at the University of Michigan. Grosse Pointe South High School in the state of Michigan as well is where he played his high school football. Was ranked as on the 247 composite ranking as number 15 overall player. And for people that don't understand the composite, it takes in all the major recruiting platforms together and kind of averages out some type of, it's not a one for one, but it's a little bit of an algorithm there. Number 15th overall player in the 2022 recruiting class and a 5-star. He was rated as high, Joe, by Rivals as the number 5 overall player in his class. Overall, not number 5 corner.
Makes sense.
Number 5 overall player. It does. And if you actually watch his high school highlights, I don't think you have. If you have, please correct me. But Will Johnson was actually a dynamic wide receiver in high school as well. He legitimately could have played wide receiver on the major college level. His last year in high school had over 1,300 all-purpose yards offensively, had over 600 receiving yards, rushing yards, and he also returned kicks and punts in high school as well. So we're talking about an all-around athlete who was a freshman All-American, all Big Ten, All-American this past year. He has certainly done a lot of great things for the Wolverines the first 2 years of his career.
Johnson might be one of the easiest corner prospects to describe because, we're talking about the athleticism here. It's rare. 6'2" guys are not supposed to be able to move the way that he can, no less at 205 pounds, whatever he's going to be listed at coming into the season. For context, Nate Wiggins was like 180 or less, and he was 6'2", and he moved really, really easily. I think that Will Johnson's in that same category where very good hip fluidity, very good burst, acceleration, close down speed. I don't think he's going to be a 4.29 guy, but he is still going to probably run a very good 40 time at the NFL Combine for his size. He's probably going to jump really well. All that stuff is going to hit. But here's the one thing, Ryan, because we could just sit here and check all the boxes like 6'2", runs fast, changes direction quickly, hips open up well. Like we could sit here and check all those boxes. But the instincts, I was dumbfounded. Like, I don't know. I think this might be the most natural decision maker at corner that I have ever seen of corners that I've watched. And I haven't been watching prospects for that long. This is my third cycle of doing guys. There are some plays where the ball, before it even comes out, he reads the play and he's there. Like you can see the quarterback starting to release the ball and he's there. Ohio State, he had a pick where he did this, where he picked off Marvin Harrison Jr., where he jumps the route before the ball comes out of McCord's hand, forces him to throw the ball into tight coverage, leading to the interception. And then it also happened in the national championship game, which I tweeted both these clips, where he read a route on the sideline. Michael Penix tries to throw in that direction, and he comes down like a bat out of hell and grabs that ball and kind of falls back onto his butt. I don't know if he came down with it or not.
I think it was just a pass breakup. I don't think he came down. But
Still though.
Yes. It's special. Joe, I mean, we always joke about the, coach's kid thing and like the lineage thing, but it matters. It 100% matters. And Will Johnson instinctively plays like a football player whose dad was a major college defensive back as well. Like it makes obviously complete sense just talking about a kid that's probably been around the game and has been playing defensive back and has seen a lot of football on the defensive side of the ball in his lifetime, right? Because that's all that comes down to is like, yeah,
Right.
some people have natural-ish instincts, but more than anything, it's about repetition and seeing it, right? The more you see, the more reps you have. That's usually where the instinctual nature comes in at. But when we're talking about just physical profiles, this kid has special rare upside at the position because at 6'2", I think he's like listed at about 202, 205 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. He is a very good straight line athlete. So what would your assumption be? Your assumption would be he's a bigger corner. He's probably good at press man, and then he can run. So obviously any type of, well, press man, obviously being able to turn and run on an island, but also playing some cover 3 scheme where he's, just working vertically and not allowing guys to get over top of him. Those things are what you would expect Will Johnson to be good at, and he is good at those things.
Yeah.
But the difference between being very good prospect to being a great prospect and being a potentially elite prospect, which I think Will Johnson is the change of direction for being a guy that's 6'2". It's different, man. That is absolutely different. I think this is a young man that with the change of direction, the length and the physicality he has, this is a kid that I always talk about diversity, right? When I'm higher on a player, it's because they can do more at a higher level. And I look at Will Johnson with the change of direction he has on top of the physical profile, the size. And I say, there's not a coverage that this kid can't run. I mean, this is a high level, versatile pass coverage player on the next level who can do a little bit of everything. So it is all there physically, mentally, and athletically for this player to be a top 10 pick for sure. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if in April we're talking about this kid being the first defensive player off the board. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable to think because he is a potentially rare cornerback on the next level.
I think what's going to get really muddled with this draft cycle, or not muddled, it's going to be a really tough debate on who is going to be the first defensive player taken because positional value is really going to come into play with a lot of these guys. And a little bit of a spoiler, like Michael Williams is a really good example where we might have him as a top 2 guy, top 3 guy in the class, and he might not go until pick 11. Just like we saw with Brock Bowers, I think most normal people with relatively apt intelligence thought he was a top 3 player in this year's class, and he goes outside of the top 10 because of positional value. But to talk about Will Johnson, I think if there is someone to go as high as Denzel Ward did a couple of years ago, to go in the top 4, to go in the top 3, it's definitely him. Denzel Ward wasn't as big and as physical and as instinctual as Will Johnson was. That was almost some considered not a reach, but was a little surprising he went that early and was expected to go in the top 10, but went a little bit earlier than we thought. I think Will Johnson's good enough for that to happen. I currently have him, I believe he's graded as my number 1 rated player. He is pretty clearly for me he's not my number 1. He's my number 2 rated player. But still, he's going to fit in this. James Pierce is number 1. He's going to fit in this special category where just all the boxes are checked. He feels so right. I don't see a way that somebody unseats him. I just don't.
Well, so there is obviously right now I am about 80 players deep on the summer eval process right now. And I will tell
Only
you
80? I'm at 200. What the hell's wrong with you?
Shut your mouth, dude. We already talked about this yesterday. Will Johnson is the second rated player in this class for me. And actually I have him above someone that we just mentioned a second ago, which I know is going to be a slight hot take here. And we'll talk about that obviously during the end of summer when we're talking about big board centric stuff. But look, man, I think that for me, I always am trying to check boxes and I'm trying to find guys that are easy evaluations early on in this process because typically guys that are easy evals in the summer stay easy evals. There's rarely ever guys that you just look at and say, like, I just don't think that guy's missing much.
And don't let the general public change your opinion on that, folks. Don't let anyone do the Marvin Harrison Jr., the Brock Bowers thing. If you hear the nitpicking, just say, nope, we're not doing this. We're not doing this.
Well, and because those guys typically are not volatile players. Their floor and their ceiling are both high in that regard, right? So typically those guys aren't volatile during the season. We'll be talking about a bunch of players this summer that are volatile prospects. They could either be day 3 kids or maybe they're first round picks at the end of the day because they have that athletic upside, but the peaks and valleys of how good they are and what you see consistently on film are just too spread apart right now. Will Johnson is one of the rare players that he's going to be a top ranked player in this class in the summer. And I would be shocked if he wasn't when the draft comes around in April, because the floor and the ceiling are both just so high. I mean, at worst, we're talking about a starting caliber cornerback on the next level who's probably plus. On the high end, this is probably an all pro. I mean, that is the kind of what I'm looking at with the Will Johnson. So, yes, he is a player that you should not overthink too much. He's 6'2 plus. He's long. He's physical. He's athletic. He's played a lot of football. He has a lineage, obviously, in the bloodlines of having a father that played major college football at Michigan as well. So when we're talking about bloodlines, athleticism, physicality, he does check all the boxes, man. So I think this kid is a top 10 player easily in this class. Like I said, I have him as the number 2 overall player in this class, and I would be shocked because there's several high-end players I still have to get to, but I would be surprised if he wasn't a top 5 player for me in this summer.
Yeah, there's definitely not a lot of offensive players that are going to unseat him. I also don't think that there's very many corners. Like, we're not going to have a Malik Neighbors situation. I just don't think it's very likely that that's going to happen. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.